Okay, you can proceed.
Ms. Bradley, I think before we went to break, we were looking at Exhibit C29. And is that the email exchange between you and Dr. Bailey to schedule the next follow-up visit?
Excuse me, yes.
If you will, read the first 4 sentences, but don't read anything that's been redacted from that document.
I am very concerned about the JPS situation. They have had 2 file reviews along with protocol reviews that have each demonstrated concerns. I do think that has initiated several positive strategies. In addition, I think she has also set the stage for beginning to do some positive things for, and possibly the others.
One more sentence for me.
However, in terms of systemic concerns, it seems that she has been given little authority to move forward in terms of working with us on implementing the corrective action plan.
So after working with Fluency Plus to come up with some dates, did the Department of Education schedule a meeting with Fluency Plus to discuss the continued collaboration with JPS to work towards compliance?
Yes.
Okay. And when was that meeting scheduled?
April 12th, 2012.
And is confirmation of that meeting what's found in Exhibit C30?
Exhibit C30 is a letter from me dated April 6, 2012 to Dr. Dale Bailey confirming a meeting with Fluency Plus members in the Mississippi Department of Education scheduled for Thursday, April 12, 2012 at 1 p.m. at the department.
And did the department also schedule a meeting with Fluency Plus and JPS to discuss the continued collaboration to work towards compliance?
Yes.
And when was that meeting scheduled?
That meeting was scheduled for Thursday, April 12, 2012 at 3 o'clock p.m. here at the department.
And is Exhibit C31 the letter confirming that meeting with JPS?
Yes.
And did the department conduct another follow-up visit to JPS after the November 15th and 16th, 2011 visit?
Yes.
And if you look at Exhibit C32, tell the commission what that letter is.
Exhibit C32 is a letter from me to Dr. Jane Sargent dated April 9, 2012, notifying the district that the Office of Special Education would be conducting a follow-up visit on April 18 through the 19, 2012.
And did that visit occur?
That visit did occur. It actually occurred over a 3-day period. We were in the district April 18, 19, and 20.
And did you participate in that visit?
I was there a portion of the time, yes.
Has the department made official findings regarding that visit yet?
No.
In your opinion, Ms. Bradley, has the Department of Education and Fluency Plus provided JPS with the necessary tools, technical assistance, and help for JPS to have achieved compliance within the 1-year time frame?
Yes.
And when the department issued its report, it's the January 13th, 2012 letter, and then the report behind that, the November 15th to 16th, 2011, did it have timelines in that report for when things needed to be corrected?
Yes.
And what were those timelines?
All timelines were noted as immediately.
Those are all the questions I have at this time.
Good afternoon, Brad. How you doing?
Doing fine.
I've got a few questions to ask, and I want to do this primarily for point of clarification. The original complaint against the school district came from Mississippi Youth Justice, is that correct?
That's correct.
And that is a subsidiary of the Southern Poverty?
Yes.
Okay, and so that organization filed a complaint against the school district on behalf of 9 individual students and issues that they had with regard to those individual students. Is that correct?
That is correct, as well as similarly situated students.
Well, I'll get to that in a moment. The first question was, it included only 9 students that they were
9
representing,
petitioners, yes.
correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, in addition to their complaint about these 9 students, and there were different issues in there about free appropriate public education and services and so on, and I think y'all already covered some of that in your documentation, they threw into their complaint a whole list of what they call systemic complaints. In other words, issues that were happening system-wide based on the fact that they believed these 9 students were a victim of these systemic issues. Is that basically it?
Yes.
Okay, now, the school district and Southern Poverty entered into some settlement negotiations. You're aware of that, correct?
Yes, sir.
You're not aware of that? I believe in one of the documentations it talks about the school district trying to work out a settlement with Southern Poverty, but at any rate it was not successful, and the district then announced to the State Department announced that it was going to send in a monitoring team. Is that correct?
I'm not aware of the situation that you described. I just know that we received the complaint and we moved forward with our investigation.
Right, okay. And on the investigation, the State Department notified the school district that it would be investigated by the State Department as a result of this complaint that had been filed with the department by Southern Poverty, correct?
Yes.
Now, do you recall who it was that the State Department sent in to investigate these allegations made by Southern Poverty?
On the first visit,
Yes. That would have been in November of 2004.
Dale Bailey and Tawny McLean.
And who are Dale Bailey and Tony McLean?
They are contractual team leaders. They have a contract with the Department of Education, and they are also they are part of Fluency Plus.
Okay. Fluency Plus is the corporate name, but Dale Bailey is a principal of that firm. Are you aware of that?
Yes.
Okay. And then Ms. McLean is also one of the principals of that firm. Are you familiar with that?
I know she works for the firm.
Now, when they came in to visit the district, do you know specifically what they reviewed to come up with their conclusions?
I know that they reviewed the student files of the 9 petitioners. I believe they looked at some randomly selected files as well. But any pertinent information for these 9 petitioners, which included functional behavioral assessments, behavior intervention plans, they looked at discipline data, attendance records, office discipline referrals. That would be at a minimum.
Yeah, for those 9 students,
for
correct?
those 9, yes.
Now, how many random files did they look at?
I do not know.
Okay. And then based on their review of the files for these 9 students and these random files, do you have an order of magnitude of how many they looked at?
Not off the top of my head, I do not.
Okay. Based on their conclusions that they made, because they were investigating on behalf of the Department of Education, right?
Correct.
That is what generated that letter of non-compliance in November of 2010, correct?
That is what generated the findings and decision, yes.
Right.
The
And
result of
obviously,
their review.
it had to come from their review because they were going to in there doing the review, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So that kicked into motion the State Department's finding of non-compliance in that list of 10 different areas that I think you went over, correct?
Correct.
And I think you talked about free or appropriate publication of public education and least restrictive environment and transition services. All of those lists of areas that districts are required to provide children with disabilities, to provide them an appropriate education under IDEA, correct?
Correct.
You're not alleging that all 3,000 children with disabilities in the Jackson School District are not receiving appropriate services, are you?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so this is a basis, a conclusion that there are systemic issues system-wide that need to be addressed based on that investigation, correct?
Yes.
Now, you went through, I think your initial contact, I think you said was with Dr. Edwards, is that right? Was the superintendent at the time, is that correct?
The correspondence went to Dr. Edwards,
Okay.
yes.
Went to him, but it didn't go to the school board, did it?
I don't recall.
Okay. But to your knowledge, and the only documentation that I've seen is that you sent it to Dr. Edwards. Now, after that first initial letter, now there's no secret that there were some leadership issues going on at JPS at that time. You were dealing with the staff at JPS, and there were some meetings that took place along the way, and some efforts to get the district to come into compliance. Is that a fair summarization?
Yes.
And the the consultants that you were using to interface with JPS was Fluency Plus. That's the people or the group that the Department of Education appointed to be the compliance person with regard to these findings. Is that correct?
We appointed him to serve as a technical advisor in the role of technical assistant.
Okay. Technical advisor to the district in terms of helping advise them on how they could address these non-compliance issues, correct?
They were supposed to support and assist JPS in the implementation and development of corrective actions.
Right. And this is the same group that found them in non-compliance in November, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, this particular outside group was the main consultants working with the Jackson School District during this period of time. Is that correct?
Clarify when you say working with.
Are they the ones that came in to visit with the district and they did follow-up monitoring visits with
Yes.
the State Department? Is that right? Were they involved in the follow-up monitoring visits
Yes.
with the State Department?
Yes.
And sometimes they were by themselves and sometimes they were State Department personnel?
There was always State Department personnel there at some point, maybe not from the entire start to the end of the visit.
Right. But they weren't there at the first visit though, right? Do you know if they participated in the first visit?
I know that Fluency Plus participated in the first visit, yes.
Okay. And as you also know that the school district went through some changes. There was a change in leadership at the top spot. Dr. Sargent came in.
Yes.
And would you agree with me that once Dr. Sargent came in, the level of cooperation certainly improved in terms of the willingness of the staff and the organization to work with the State Department at some point?
I cannot.
You can't say that? Okay, well, let's talk specifically. Have you had access to Dr. Sargent?
I have spoken to Dr. Sargent one time in the meeting on April 12th.
She came to that meeting.
She came to that meeting and
Has
we
anyone-
introduced ourselves, but I have never had any interaction other than written communication with her.
Has anyone at the State Department complained that they couldn't get to Dr. Sargent?
No, it has not been an issue with getting with Dr. Sargent.
Wouldn't it be fair to say that Dr. Sargent has certainly given it attention to try to get this resolved? Maybe not necessarily every single thing that the department would like to see happen, but certainly she's been accessible and willing to try to address these issues, has she not?
I don't know that I can personally say that from my standpoint.
Okay, and that's fair enough. I'm not asking you to say something that you don't have firsthand knowledge of. You didn't have any interaction with Dr. Edwards other than correspondence, correct?
Other than just being at a meeting with him initially after the findings and decision, was issued on 11/22/10.
Right.
There was a meeting with Dr. Ronnie Edwards.
Now, when you go in and do a monitoring visit, as you pointed out, the U.S. Department of Education doesn't want you to limit yourself just to the original complaint, does it? It wants you to look at all possible aspects of provision of services to children, correct?
When we look at a complaint, we are looking specifically at the allegations that are in that complaint.
Okay, but you also do not limit yourself to just that complaint, do you?
If we see if we see non-compliance in an area, then we address it, but we are limited, we limit ourselves to those allegations in the complaint. We don't add anything extra to the complaint.
Have you added anything extra to the Jackson School District's complaint?
Not to my knowledge. I thought we had been very focused on the 10 issues that were in the original complaint.
Okay, when you get to these 10 issues, and when it says non-compliance, the IDEA is very specific with regard to what is required in terms of the fact that we have to provide a free appropriate public education in the least restrictive environment to the maximum extent appropriate, correct?
Correct.
But that IDEA doesn't tell you how to do it, does it?
It defines FAPE, and that has to be determined for an individual child.
Absolutely. Every single individual child, FAPE is a determination. In fact, every one of those issues that you talked about that were systemic complaints have to address or be applied to individual students on an individual case basis.
Correct.
And if any of those parents of those children believe that their child is not receiving an appropriate education under IDEA, then they have a right to file a complaint with the State Department of Education or even a due process hearing where you guys will appoint a hearing officer and there will be a full-blown due process hearing to address whether or not the school district is providing an appropriate education for those children. Correct?
Correct.
And the whole purpose of the State Department is to ensure that school districts that they have procedures and processes in place to address the needs of individual children, correct?
Correct.
And so even though you can make allegations that there are systemic problems out there, and you can certainly find the district is not maybe doing what they need to do in certain of these areas, the bottom line question is the school district providing an appropriate education to those 3,000 plus students with disabilities and it's under this care? Is that not correct?
I cannot answer that for 3,000 children. Again.
That's exactly right, because this whole complaint is based on 9 specific kids and the allegation that systemic issues are all over the place because of what you found with regard to the 9 kids and the files that you have randomly pulled, correct?
Could you recite that, please?
This entire case is based on the allegations of 9 individual students and then the review of some random files that were pulled that led the department and your consultant, Fluency Plus, to conclude that these were systemic violations all over the district, correct?
And similarly situated students.
Similarly situated students. And what that means is every single individual child in JPS, if their parent or advocate believes that they're not receiving an appropriate education in spite of these procedures that may not be followed to a T, they have a right to file a complaint or a due process hearing. And I think y'all put into evidence over the past 2 years, there's been about 12 or 13 with complaints or due process hearings. Saw where a couple of them, 2 or 3 of them were ruled in favor of the district, which meant that the district wasn't in violation for that specific child, correct?
Correct.
And some of them were withdrawn.
Correct.
And so when you agree with me that this is not about whether or not JPS is providing an appropriate education to 3,000 plus kids, but it is limited specifically to the allegations in this complaint and how they arose. Is that correct?
It is tied to the 9 students and similarly situated students.
That's right. But you haven't identified any other similarly situated students to date, have you?
Yes, there are other similarly situated students.
There are, but they're not part of this complaint, are they?
No, they were not named as one of the 9 original petitioners.
That's right. And again, we go back to the relief that is available to a parent. And so far, over the last 2 years, there's been about 12 or 13 parents who have sought individual relief. Now, what this is really about is the district trying to work with the school district to make sure that every child receives an appropriate education, and the best way that you have from the State Department's perspective is to make sure that they have processes and procedures in place to make it happen, correct?
Correct.
And isn't that where some of the breakdown has occurred? Is not that JPS disagrees that they can do better in providing a free, appropriate public education, or they can do better in making sure that their teachers and their staff understand how to do a manifestation determination review to determine whether or not that child's behavior is a manifestation of a disability. Those are requirements under the IDEA, but that statute does not tell a school district how they have to go about and do that. And that's where your consultants come in, isn't it?
Our consultants have been involved in
That's right.
determining compliance in those areas.
And JPS has some consultants that they have hired to consult with them, correct?
Correct.
And wouldn't you agree with me that the consultants have had some disagreements on how best to implement procedures and policies to get to the same goal? Isn't that a fair statement?
Yes.
Okay. You're not finding that JPS is not wanting to correct the problem, but you do have some disagreements with maybe your particular position or your consultant's position on, for example, you mentioned this, the data that he gathered to show whether or not a functional behavioral assessment is being properly conducted, and then a BIP or behavior intervention plan is now put in place, correct?
Yes.
And there are opinions all over this world as to how to do FBAs and BIPs, and your consultants have an opinion about that, and so do the JPS consultants, correct?
Correct.
And they don't necessarily see eye to eye.
Correct.
And so this deal that you point out in this letter about this pushback or this lack of cooperation hasn't been a lack of cooperation, but it's been a difference in opinions on how best to achieve that objective. Isn't that a fair statement?
I would say to a degree that that is an accurate statement, but there's also been resistance to Fluency Plus providing the technical assistance.
You mentioned this last meeting that you had with the district. Who all came from the school district to show that they were certainly wanting to do what the State Department is suggesting with regard to corrective action?
You're referring to the April 12th?
Yes.
I believe it was Tom Burnham, Tina Atkins.
Excuse me, now Tom Burnham is not the Tom Burnham who's the State
No.
Department.
This is
Not
the-
your boss, right? Your boss
Right.
didn't come to this meeting.
Right.
Okay.
Tina Atkins, Loretta Smith,
These are school district employees.
yes, Dr. Sargent,
Superintendent Dr. Sargent is there.
Dr. Wilbur Walters,
Okay.
Yolanda Addison.
And do you understand what position that these people
Yes, I do.
have in the district?
Yes, I do.
These are high-level administrators in the district.
Correct.
Okay.
They had the other two individuals were consultants. They were not employees, but contractual
Do you remember who
consultants.
those were?
Carolyn Black and Dr. Yvonne Brooks.
Carolyn Black was the former Director of Special Education for the state of Mississippi, correct?
That's correct.
In fact, she might have been your supervisor at one time. Okay. And who was the other person?
Dr. Yvonne Brooks.
Okay, Dr. Brooks, who was the former Special Ed Director for the Jackson Public School District.
That's correct.
And all these people came to this last meeting that you had at the State Department.
Yes. And one other individual that I cannot remember her name.
Okay, one more, please. One last question. When this initial report was issued by the State Department on the basis of Fluency Plus's monitoring or involving investigation in the district. How many days did they spend in the district reviewing documents?
It was either 4 or 5. It was spread out over several days.
And do you have that anywhere in your documentation that it was 4 or 5?
It's Exhibit C18, October 14, 15, 20, and 22 of 2010, 4 days.
4 days. And do you know how much time they spent there each day?
I do not. I'm assuming it was 4 days.
Okay. One last question I would ask you is on the C29, this document that you were reading from about the lack of cooperation by the district, you remember that email you were reading from?
Yes,
That's from Dale Beatty, isn't it?
that is correct.
And Dale Beatty is the Dale Beatty that you just mentioned with Fluency Plus, who is the consultant paid for by the Department of Education, correct?
Yes.
And he's the one that you said is there to advise the district in terms of trying to help them implement the processes, correct?
That is one of his roles.
I noticed that you did use the word direct, so he doesn't have the authority to direct the district, does he, but simply to advise?
That is correct.
Okay. Because if you directed the district on the methodology and it didn't work, then you would have nobody to blame but maybe the methodology, right?
Suppose.
So methodology, the school district certainly should be heavily involved in that discussion on methodology, should they not?
It should be a collaborative effort.
But at the end of the day, if there is a disagreement, you're going to hold the district accountable for reaching a particular result, so you can't dictate to them the methodology if there's disagreement between the experts, correct?
We would look at what minimum compliance is under IDEA in that decision.
I understand that, but for example, this data, you mentioned in this letter that you wrote, you talked about there was nothing in there to talk about the amount of data that was going to be collected, et cetera, and so on. You will agree with me that nowhere in the IDEA dictates data to be collected in any particular form or fashion, does it?
That's correct.
Okay, those were the questions.
Can we direct? Just a couple. Ms. Bradley, September 8th, 2010 complaint. When the Department of Education went in and did its follow-up visits, and it issued its report in November 2011. Were any of the original 9 petitioners cleared for the non-compliance that had been found?
In November 2011?
Yes, ma'am.
No.
Okay. And regardless of whether JPS chooses to follow the methodology of their consultants or Fluency Plus's consultants, had JPS been able to demonstrate to the department that the procedures, the policies that they are using were being implemented at the school level and were successful, would they have been cleared?
They were not able to demonstrate that, and if they had, they would have been cleared.
So the State Department is not concerned with the methodology if it brings about a successful result. Is that correct?
I don't mind her questioning the witness, but I do object her leading the witness to her testimony.
I'll give her a little bit of latitude because it is an administrative hearing, but try to ask her a more open-ended question.
When the department hires a technical advisor, what is the role of that technical advisor?
The role of the technical advisor is to assist the district in developing corrective actions and implementing those corrective actions providing the technical assistance that is needed to correct the identified noncompliance. And they also serve in an advisory or feedback role to the department, giving us feedback on what they have observed, what they have seen, or what they have evaluated.
That's all I have.
Do the commission members have any questions for Ms. Bradley?